Salud. All right. Thank you for being on here. I think we're live. Okay, so welcome to Island Origins Live. It is April 24th. 24th. One of those days. We're having wine. Who cares? So, I am Khalib. If you've never met me before, I'm Khalib. This is Sexy Man.
That's me.
Sexy Man,
Can't help
aka
it.
I'm drunk already. I'm sorry. All right, forgive me. But this is Island Origins Live. Of course, you can find us right here on Facebook every Tuesday evening at 7 o'clock. You can also find us in print online at Island Origins Mag and on our television show. So today we have two fabulous women. Because do we ever have any other kind of woman here? We have two fabulous women who are going to be talking to us about some of the crises that are taking place, specifically in South Florida, but just in our community in general, and how we can kind of address some of these crises. Both of these are David's friends first and
Nothing wrong with that.
I'm coming into the fold, don't worry about it. But we're going to start off, or the topic of conversation again is going to be how we turn the conversation kind of, I guess, from conflict and crisis to cooperation and collaboration. And we are starting with, I'm not going to do the bios, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves. So I will start with Ms. Priscilla Dames, who I know from full disclosure, left-wing liberal Democrat. We met first 8 years ago when we were getting, or 4 years ago when we were getting Barack Obama elected for the second time with Akua. I don't know if you remember all of that. But Ms. Dames.
I know her well. She's a friend of mine.
Oh, I don't know if you remember the situation. But yes, Priscilla Dames. Please introduce yourself.
Hi. First, thanks to both of you for having me. And so this whole piece is exciting for me, not just about what I'm doing, but what you're doing, bringing in the community and these issues, because sometimes they're really tough topics like you're going to cover today, and it needs to be talked about. I am old as dirt, and I'm going to just put that out there, because I was, so as to speak, discovered 1,000 years ago by the Anti-Defamation League. And even at that time, bigotry and inequalities just unnerved me. And I was so outspoken as I was in one of their audiences about the topic that I ended up on the front of the Miami Herald with a very ugly face.
Oh, please.
Where do you borrow it from? Because you don't have one.
Exactly.
Talking to a bigot, and they came back and asked me if I would like to train to be one of their consultants, and they sent me all over the state of Florida to racially tense situations, and that's how I got my beginnings in training and conflict resolution. And you fast forward that into the school system, and I began my doctorate, and I retired from the school system as a safe school specialist, and our number one responsibility was conflict resolution training. Particularly the adults, because one of the things that I know, we cheated a little bit, we talked ahead of time, that Shirley's going to talk about how the adults sometimes heads are in the sand and we need to be educated more. So our responsibility was not training children, but it was the faculty, the community, including the superintendents and faith-based in conflict resolution. What do we do? And it grew into also crisis response for Dade County Public School. So I retired from Dade County as a crisis responder. I do have a business, Wingspan Seminars, Conflict Resolution. I did start my doctorate. And I have been involved with women's issues forever and ever, because youth issues are women's issues, right? And so, and somehow or another, it's morphed into me launching a business called Professionally Fabulous. And I'm going to stop there for you. I told you I was
That's a
going
good
to
start.
start.
I have like 20 questions already.
I could not even begin to try and condense that.
I'm going to hold it so that we can
Women,
go.
Children's issues are women's, every issue is women's issues as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
our next guest is Shirley Timothy Paul.
Hi.
Who we know from another business, but she's here independently today, just as someone who has just a vast wealth of information on certain topics, and you can go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for having me, both of you. And my name is Shelley Timothy Paul, and I'm an RN educator. I've been practicing now for just under 2 decades.
Hang on,
Primarily,
I know you're into it, and I'm being very rude to stop
no,
you.
not a problem.
But I want to make sure that people heard you. You said you were a RN,
Registered nurse, yes.
and then what followed that? You're a
Educator.
so you educate other registered nurses? Is that
I
what it
do.
works? Okay,
I
keep going.
educate other registered
I want to make sure
nurses,
I
and
understood
I
that
educate
clearly.
the community, so a number of health professionals as well as the community. And today, our focus will be primarily on the community because we are in crisis. There's a number of things happening within our community, specifically the African American community and Caribbean communities. So definitely, the conversation is paramount. It's needed.
Right.
We're definitely in crisis.
Right. Okay, so do you want to kick off the questions? You look like you're jumping out of your skin.
No, I'm not jumping
I
out.
need
but
to contain you. I need to contain.
So listen, I'm hearing something, and I did do some cheating too, if that means I did some amount of like thinking about what it is that we're going to talk about. And
That's called preparation.
oh my gosh, I don't do any of that. Preparation, I don't participate in that.
Are you saying the woman
You're
does all
going
that
soft.
kind of work?
That's the woman. Listen, and I'll be. Here's the thing. I'm gonna be 100% real on this. It's like I am one of the greatest fans of women, and I am a strong advocate for all things women. I believe women are the most fabulous beings possible,
Yes, we are.
and I totally agree
agree
with
with
that.
you.
I totally am down
Let me guess,
100%.
you have a mother.
I think everyone has one. I can't imagine who came on earth without one. But I did have a mother. She's
He's
passed now.
respectful of
But I'm
hers,
absolutely
obviously.
respectful of
Absolutely.
women.
Yeah.
So many things. I'm going to start here. As you were talking, it seemed like I was hearing that there was a tension. Yes, you had started. Tell us about what you study in that PhD, because it came in like 3 times, and I just want to get a sense of who are you in terms of your pursuit. Not all the things you've done, amazing. Love the conflict resolution, love the crisis management. But what is it that you are pursuing in that education piece and with your life now moving forward? Talk about that.
That's a great question.
I was listening to you.
You know, I think God is moving me in a direction that I had not necessarily planned. As I think about it, all things are connected, but I hadn't thought about it. I've never had a woman's group per se, and now I do. But I've always been very involved in conflict and how people are not equalized in what we have out here on this earth. And I like to talk about the earth, the world, because God put all of this here for all of us, not for any particular group. And I felt very strongly about the inequalities in society, and where we as Black people in the diaspora, not African Americans, but all of, have been pigeonholed, and some of it we have allowed, some of it is our responsibility, but I have always been very, very active when it comes to Black affairs, and I am on the African American Black Affairs Advisory Board for Miami-Dade County. But when you say inequalities, it doesn't just end there with the diaspora. We're talking about women, we're talking about children, and indeed we're talking about education also. It has not been equalized, and I think first let me tell you, Dr. Barbara Carey Schuler and Athalie Raines, that let you know how old I am, they were the ones that put me on the Black Affairs Advisory Board. And once I came out of the classroom and became a trainer within Dade County Public Schools, you think you know what's going on, but you don't until you are actually within a system, and you go from the affluent schools to the schools that are just the opposite, and where you see there's a plethora of books and the televisions
Can,
and
can
the
I
carpet.
pause you just to ask for a clarification? How do you get schools that are affluent and non-affluent? How does that work? What's the policies behind why there's a disparity in the schools? Because shouldn't education be the same for everyone? You worked in the school system, and I know this is like taking us completely left field, so I apologize in advance. But I just wonder, I still want to know more about what's your passion, but how do you have affluent and non-affluent schools? How does that work?
And you know, that's why I'm intrigued with what Shirley's going to talk about, because hers still goes back to education. Because being an educator, whether I'm a trainer or not, I'm still an educator. I'm a mommy, so that's an educator. I grew up professionally in very affluent schools. We're talking about Pinecrest, we're talking about the east side of the highway in Kendall, where my children went to school and where I started my professional.
But I think David is asking, like, is that because of the zip code and how much taxes the people are paying over here? Why is there an affluent
Some
school
of that,
separate?
but not necessarily, because with me growing up professionally in those types of schools, that's what I knew. And I'm glad I had that experience. And I learned how to teach in those schools because the parents were very demanding. However, when I became a trainer and I was assigned to F&D schools as a reading specialist, and these schools were in Region 3, we're talking about Liberty City, and I saw that there were very few books, even in the library, and no carpet and no televisions during those days. It was a while ago.
But again, I have to stop you to say, so how do we get there? How does a school in Liberty City get different funding, or what's the policy that makes a school affluent and non-affluent?
What I learned is that it is not all policy, because generally speaking, the policies are the same across the board, generally speaking. But so much has to do with, yes, the zip code and the parents. Because what the school system didn't provide, the parents provided and demanded. And basically, they got what they demanded.
That was what I was searching for. So we can, again, from someone who is a history and has worked in education and specifically in the school system, we can say that it's on the parents to demand
Absolutely.
and to activate their children so that they have the best education.
The parents and our leaders, and I mean all of the leaders.
Okay.
Yes,
All right.
because we cannot blame everything on everyone else. That taught me, even as a mother, before I became a mother, what to do for my own children.
So I gotta bring Shirley in. Okay.
We were in
so-
Jamaica, we'd be on the street saying, we want justice.
That's
Okay,
right.
all right. Yes, all right, so go ahead.
So, yeah, so Shirley, so again, because we're talking about education, and I have found in my humble time on this earth that there's a huge, and my dad taught this to me, because I grew up essentially privileged, because my dad came from dirt poor, and because he got a great education, I grew up privileged. Now, didn't mean we had money, but I had access to great education. So as a young person, I thought, oh my gosh, Jamaica is special. We have the best education system in the world. I went to the best schools. Everything was great. And then somebody said, my dad anyway, said, well, what about all these other people who don't have the same access to education that you have? And I was like, oh my gosh, I did not realize that, because what I was getting was this best education possible, that everybody wasn't getting the same. You're in education, you're teaching. How do we address that? Talk to us about what it is you're doing in education, and how do we look at what's moving everybody forward? You talk about Caribbean, African American, our communities. How do we move them forward in some kind of equitable way?
Well, primarily, and this is, I do agree with quite a bit of what you've said, but one of the things I think is extremely important is starting at home and understanding the role of the consumer. We spend a lot of time saying that we feel as if we're not being funded appropriately, we're not being exposed to what we think would be better for our children. But as parents, from the start, we have to basically understand how this country works, how money works, being a consumer, understanding, for instance, people make comment about why our communities are filled with, Popeyes, McDonald's, things that we feel are unhealthy, but if that's what we're purchasing, that's what's going to be in the area. So having the education about nutrition early on, we'll shift. We'll get the Whole Foods and we'll get the Starbucks and things of the like. You know, the issue at hand is the question of understanding our power. Where amongst actually, I believe African Americans and Caribbeans are top of the line in consumerism, purchasing, but keeping the money in the community. And it's not happening because we feel that we have to go out and purchase things that will make us seen or feel better, whatever that means. It's all about our perception. But if we're not spending the money on our communities, for instance, whatever, marketing, whatever it is, if the funds are here, everything else will shift this way. It's not simply about race, although that is an issue. It's more about money.
I want to just say to all the audience, wherever you are out there watching the show, let's get your questions. We want to know what your thoughts are, and we want to know what you want to ask the people that we have as guests today. This is the Island Origins Live, and we want it to be interactive. We want to get your questions. So, with that said, Nikki, whenever there are any questions, let us know. Our production team is here. Nikki Lopez, DMR Media. So I want to make sure we get the question. So send us your thoughts,
And
questions.
make sure you hit share.
And do hit share. Thank you, Ms. Kelly. Thank you.
I'm here for something.
Yeah.
Carry on. You're doing a great job, by the way.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Yes.
I'm on vacation today.
Okay, good. There's so much I want to just continue, because here's the thing, and I hear you, and we don't always have to agree on everything.
Of course.
But based on what you're saying, I'm wondering, because again, I feel it from my own upbringing, and I see it right here today. What are the steps? Now, I hear part of the demanding steps, but a lot of the times when it comes to education, and I want us to actually talk about crisis, because you both mentioned crisis,
Right.
but when we talk about, I don't know if we're officially in a crisis educationally, but a lot of the times we don't know what we don't know, because we've been, let's just say, I don't want to put too many heavy words on the system that's out there, but there's an intention in what has not been taught and what is not being said. Because as you were talking about Whole Foods and things like that, I'm going to tell you what I'm hearing in my mind going on. I'm hearing, okay, so if I go to Whole Foods, is everything I buy in Whole Foods going to be healthy?
No, that's
Exactly.
not what I'm
So right. So when you say bring the Whole Foods type place into the community, I am a fan of anything that's for us, that's better for us, health wise and so on. But it can't just be about a brand.
No. No.
So we need more than just the
Right.
store. We need the education about what to get out of that store. And I think that's what I'm looking for, that answer. How do we get to the knowledge?
I think that's what you were saying, though, that
It-
we
it
need to be
is, it is.
educated.
And when I
Yeah.
use those particular shops, it's not so much that brand. I'm just showing how we perceive our areas. For instance, you cross over pretty much any MLK or Martin Luther King Boulevard. If primarily the areas look decrepit, or you know that the schools may have poor education or high dropout rates and things like that, but there's a reason. Again, it's primarily where the funds are being spent. If we're from a community and we don't think the quality of our own product is worth it, then we're pretty much destroyed from the start. So then we're fighting to get out, and we don't look back. And not everyone does that, but we're encased, which is one of the problems where they begin. For instance, the majority of us are born and raised into strict religious families, and from the beginning, there's certain conversations we just don't have until we start getting exposed to life. Education is free. It is, because we can encourage our children to start reading from early on. We can get books and start exposing them to who we really are, and not allow media essentially to tell us who we are from our communities. So definitely it has to start with education, but it also has to start with a self-liking, a self-love. You find that a lot too, where communities, if you hear how we speak about ourselves, then what do we expect from anyone else?
Agreed. I'm going to jump into the crisis part of it, because part of how you came to be on the show today was that we were talking, you were talking about some health issues in the community in general.
Right.
And you touched on AIDS in in specificity.
Right.
And I was not aware, apparently it's common knowledge, but I was not aware that Broward, where we are, has the second highest AIDS rate in the country, behind Miami, which has the first, and ahead of West Palm Beach, which has the third.
Well,
So,
Well, what it is, it's actually the highest of new cases of
New
HIV.
cases, right.
And that's just the new cases who have been tested.
right,
So the crisis is far more than we believe it is.
right.
And it's frightening because, of course, at the top of those new infections are black men, black community in general, but primarily young black men between the ages of 15 and 24.
And
So-
when we were talking before, you said part of the challenge or part of why this is happening here more than anywhere else is the same challenge of religion. And I don't want to.
Right.
Let me let you explain that.
Can I interject something
Yes.
here? Just rolling back just a little bit. One of the things that David said is we don't know what we don't know. I think that is paramount. But one of the things that you said also was when you started talking about food, you started talking about just briefly the types of places that are in so many of our black communities. And that is paramount too. And that ties directly into money. Where are we buying what we eat? And also, even the pawn shops and the Dollar General, which I shop there too. The kinds of places, however, that are in our community, that's where we go for convenience, but we haven't been educated enough to know that these places are killing us and are not good for us. Now, if you roll it forward a little bit, we're better educated today than we were 20 and 30 years ago, but so much of it really does go back to we don't know what we don't know, and the types of places that we spend our money in our own community.
Now, if we're still sticking on that particular area, we are spending our money outside of our communities. That is the primary issue. And when we continue to do that, spending monies on things that honestly are not helping to grow us as individuals, that is an issue. We are very, very focused on, apparently it's a psychological issue from the past of not being able to have something, and now that you can have it, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can afford it. Absolutely. But again, it's global. The issue is education, and it starts from early on. But the self-love has to be there as well. You have to want for yourself to grow as well as the community that surrounds you. And we were talking about crisis. One of the issues that make it so difficult to teach, especially the young adults, is the issue of not speaking about sex because of their strong religious background. Now, religion is obviously a very touchy subject, and no one wants to go there, but if we don't go there, how are we going to get to the root cause?
I'm confused about this because what does sex have to do with religion? I just don't even see the correlation.
Okay. Now,
Oh.
understand.
Yeah, I'm trying to put it together. Please tell me how.
As a young member of church, most of what we believe to be right and wrong is learned there. And it doesn't mean we're not doing it. And why I say church is an
Doing
issue
it
of
meaning
religion.
sex.
No, I'm going there.
Yeah,
I'm going
okay.
there. I mean, you have young individuals. We're in a hypersexualized time where everything that sells somehow has a sex component. And if we're not bringing that issue into the church where there's an actual open discussion, regardless of how it has to be brought on, we have to talk about it because we are still having sex. And I say this, I could use an example of a young woman who found out that she was HIV positive but did not have any clue as to how she got it. And her idea of sex was vaginal sex. And as long as she was doing it in other methods, she was fine because she would consider herself a virgin. And this is because of her strict religious background. However, she contracted HIV through anal sex. Now, if that is happening and we're not discussing it and we're not teaching safe sex, of course we want to teach abstinence for our young, but it's not happening. So if they're getting sick and we may be speaking the right word based on our practice in religion, our children are still getting sick. How are we going to deal with that head on if the people that they trust aren't willing to go there? They're
Yeah,
not willing
I'm
to
totally
discuss it.
confused because I understand what you're saying, but I'm just not understanding why any parent, is not going to talk to their child about sex. Like,
What household
What?
did you grow up in?
I mean, David.
but no, but that's the thing. We're not living in 1960s anymore, right?
Oh,
That
really?
It's not even about that, but we're living in communities that are still very religious, and so there are still things that that people do not
you
speak
don't
about.
talk because of religion. But
Religion,
that's where
tradition.
I'm totally confused because like and again I'm a very
And you're
different
not
period.
religious, right? You're not religious
No, but think
either.
about it.
But-
Even as adults, I don't know about you particularly, but are you comfortable speaking about sex in front of your parents who are now in their 70s while we're in our 40s?
Absolutely.
I
Well,
do
then
not speak
your
about it
environment
at all.
was very different from mine. But yes.
No, I just decided to not live like I'm still in my original environment because again, to me, like my parents talking to me about sex. I mean, let's talk about sex, people. My parents talking to me. This is what happened with me. Typically, any children that came to my home when I was a teenager, my mom would look them in the eye and say, "Don't have sex with my son." That was her way of talking to me about sex.
Okay.
And if you're gonna have sex with my son, make sure he wears a condom. That's what she would say to young ladies who came to my house. Most of who were just my platonic friends. I was not having any sex with them, but this was how my mother was dealing with it. So she didn't talk to me directly about sex. She talked to any girl who came inside. No, imagine if I were gay. That she would have missed everybody.
I wanted to throw that in
Oh,
there
of
because that's one of
course,
my
yeah.
topics of conflict.
Right,
Okay,
yeah.
that I train
But
on.
I wasn't, and I guess she could tell.
Homophobia and AIDS.
Right.
It's very relevant. People don't talk about it.
But I have chosen not to have the same for my children. So for my children, like 4 and 5, I'm talking to them about what is sex and the relevance of sex in their lives, because I did not want what I had. I did not want to not get it. So I learned all I learned about sex because of what my peers were saying or what they may have taught you in school and experimental and so on.
I had HBO.
But that is the topic right there that Shirley is saying. Look at all those places you just named
Right.
that you learned about sex
Absolutely.
rather than your parents
Right.
talking to you and teaching.
Which is why I'm
and
saying,
many children
how
are
is it today that
learning
we're
out there
still
in
doing
the
the
street.
same thing. We need
Yes.
to make those changes.
Now, you have to remember, we're teaching each other, and as generations pass, we're also passing on what we learn. There are a number of things that I decided to break the cycle in my upbringing,
Right.
where it's because of either hurt or I have family members, one of my closest, which is my best friend and cousin, who raised in the same environment, but continued the same patterns of the rough upbringing, look at you, you're never gonna be nothing, that type of thing. While we decided, no, this is not what we want to do. So it depends on the person. You
I see
decided
my
no.
friends becoming their parents,
Oh,
and that's what
absolutely,
you're seeing as well.
absolutely.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
in a homophobic society, that is very prevalent also. And that goes back to the church,
Right.
the upbringing, to our communities. We don't want to talk about it. That is just so hush hush, and it's taboo in many of the Caribbean communities. However, we are familiar with it, and we know it's going on right there in our own churches. But it's hush hush. We don't want to talk about it. So those children grow up knowing that they're gay from a very early age. We're talking 3 and 4 year olds. They know they're different. They don't know they're gay. They know they're different. And so they're out there floundering with their own misperceptions and conceptions of things that are going on out there, but with ignorance. And that leads very often to being bullied and sometimes even, and I know we have to stop here, but even as far as suicide, which is very, very heavy.
That is a crisis that we
Yes.
definitely
Huge
need to
crisis.
talk
A third
talk
of the
about.
children that commit suicide are gay.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, yeah. So we definitely need to talk about that right after we come back from this commercial break, where of course we're going to say thank you to our friends at DMR Media. All this awesome camera switching and fanciness that you see going on is all courtesy of DMR Media. All of our graphics, our drone shots, you're going to see some awesome advertising graphics work as well. All of that is coming to you from DMR Media. If you need this service, the information is on your screen right now. And our next supporter is, of course, Nikki. of course.
Of course.
That's a very Jamaican thing to say, right? Is of course Nikki Lopez Creative, who by the way has a live show that she does after hours. If you go to facebook.com/Nikki Lopez Creative, you will always hear about half an hour after our show ends. You'll hear from various artists and cultural personalities and people in the cultural arts inside of the South Florida space. That's with Nikki Lopez. Of course, she does all of our social media, and if you've been seeing the social media for Taste the Islands Experience, Nikki's in charge of all of that. So I think she's doing a pretty good job. I think she's doing some for the WebFest as well, where I will be this week Friday at 5 o'clock. So see you there. And of course, this next half hour is brought to you by the Taste the Islands Experience. Do we have the ad? Run it.
Gourmet Bites, Caribbean cocktails, fabulous people. The all-inclusive 2018 Taste the Islands Experience, June 2nd from 4 to 10 p.m. on the breathtaking tropical grounds of the Fort Lauderdale Historical Society. Indulge in gourmet island cuisine, premium cocktails and spirits, cooking and mixology demos with celebrity chefs, live DJs, and more. Visit TTIExperience.com. That's TTIExperience.com. Powered by Island Syndicate and Sunny.org.
Awesomeness. Awesomeness. All right. So we hope to see you all out there on June 2nd at the Taste the Islands Experience. And are we back to the show?
We are.
All right. Awesome. Okay. So we were talking about some of the crises of suicide and bullying and the things that happen as a result of us not speaking candidly.
And before we continue, I do want to just mention some of the things that is happening in the chat. So a lot of comments, a whole lot of comments. I don't feel that there's many questions, so I want people to show the questions. But I just want to go back to some of the things that were said earlier because I wasn't checking the comments. And Adrian, thank you so much for making a comment. Everything in Whole Foods may not be healthy, but nothing in some of the corner stores are healthy. And that's a very relevant point to what was being said earlier. So I thank you for that clarification. Some communities have no access to healthy foods in close proximity to their homes, which is key when reliable transportation is an issue. Yes. So again, valid point. I also see here regarding sex, someone has commented, I'm using that line, don't have sex with my son or my daughter. Don't take my mother's tactics. Don't do it. However, it worked out well in the end. I did not have anything. But again, another comment, education does start from the top, and that is in the home. We cannot continue to rely on others to teach our children. Absolutely. Times have changed. Even religious homes are much more enlightened than we think. And that comment goes on and on. I won't read any more, but I do want to say that there are a lot of great comments. And a lot of comments are that the ladies look lovely and that they love your attire and everyone is colorful. So I want to just pass that on to the ladies.
Oh, thank you.
And I'm going to end because there are a lot of comments. But I do want to share this one with you before we go back. Love the commercial. Keep up the great work, guys. So the DMR Media, you're getting a big respect for your commercial. Yes. That's excellent. And now back to the series.
It was a DMR Blondie Russ collaboration.
Oh, okay.
Toast to you.
More wine.
And now back to the serious content. I just wanted to share some of those great comments.
Yes. Okay. So we're going back to the discussion. You threw the bomb in there before we went to the commercial break about the suicides and the hard stuff that we don't want to talk about. But that's coming from a lack of clear communication. So obviously the solution is communication, but where are we with that process?
Being homophobic is extremely prevalent when you talk about crisis in our communities, and it's not. And here again, I think one of the things Shirley said that everything is not about race. It's not necessarily a black or white situation. The community of gays, we could say that as far as community, black, white, Hispanic, whatever. Our youth are in trouble that are gay, and it's not just gay. It's the perception is there because they may be bi, they may be trans, and they may question. That's where the question mark comes in. questioning their own sexuality. And the children do know very, very early that something is different about them. And we try to make sure that people understand that it's not about sex, because they're not having sex at that early age, but they know that they're different. And at the very early age, when the teasing and the bullying will begin, and when as the children grow up, the parents often know that they are different, maybe even suspected, but they still are not wanting to talk about it. And sometimes they wait too late, meaning waiting till the child has done all kinds of experimentation, run away from home several times, already been bullied, treated differently at school, included by the educators, and by that time they're already in trouble.
I was gonna say that to you. So there's the education on the side of the family of the child who may think that they're different, and there's the education on the side of they're not the kids who are doing the teasing are learning that from home. And then they come to school and they're not being corrected by the teachers that this is not a good thing to do. So where are they going to learn it from?
Oh, that's the question. If we're not teaching it, who do you think they're learning it from?
But then there's a double
Didn't you say
problem.
it goes back to the parents?
Because if the
Yes,
parents
absolutely.
are not yet accepting themselves, they don't accept differences,
Their own
they don't expect.
Well,
And that's where it goes back to the religion too, because Shirley pointed out religion. You said basically, what does the religion have to do with it? Oftentimes, the religions are so homophobic and against gays, period, because of the culture too. Because remember, religion and culture overlap. That they don't want to talk about it, or they say no, it's just not accepted in our culture. To the extreme that the children, once they come out or are outed by a friend, by a teacher, by a whomever, that sometimes they're actually beat in their own homes by their own parents or by a sibling, and then they're running away.
Because they can
begins.
beat the gay out of them, or they
Well,
can.
they can,
Yeah.
with the Bible sometimes.
Yeah.
We're talking about
Yeah.
kids that are homeless. A lot of it is because of that. They're not being accepted in their own home and being beat by and with the Bible. Actually, it's an extreme situation.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
No,
stop there.
I'm listening to
Shirley
you and
wants
I'm in
to.
total agreement. But imagine, because sometimes you must try even to take yourself and put yourself in the position of being raised in a very religious environment and knowing that you feel something, whatever it is, and you can't be honest about it, or being led to feel that something is wrong with you, but yet you're a child of God, period. You
And
may
I'm-
not have me on this show after this.
No, that's fine. I have to
It's very
interject because
prevalent.
there's one of the comments is that could you talk a bit about avoiding discussions with mental health in communities of color, and I feel as though there's gonna always be mental health challenges if you can't accept yourself. Like if the foundation of your
Of course.
acceptance in the world is that
Absolutely.
who you are is not acceptable,
That's right.
then you're gonna end up with some severe mental health issues.
That lead to
how-
quite a bit.
How do we address that as a part of working through the crisis, the overall balance of all that's going on? Is there a part to play where how do we deal with mental health?
And remember, suicide and ideation of is mental health. And I would just even recommend that you have a whole program just on this, because it is truly huge in itself. And we're talking about the children, but if the adults can't get past communication and being open, talking about it, then of course the children are not. And a year ago when I had my Women's History event, I do something having to do with women every year. One of the subcategories was tough topics, and Dr. Marilyn Volker, our sexologist this year, could not be there, but I did have one there. And I tried very hard not to have any men in the room, because even as adults, we are reluctant to talk about sex and anything relative, orientation, and anything relative around even men or our parents, or sometimes even our girlfriends. So if we're reluctant to talk about it, even with each other, then of course we're a little shy to talk about it with our child. And that's part of the problem. We don't know what we don't know, but we have been so closed-minded for so long, we won't talk about and communicate with our children. It's better than it was maybe 40, 50 years ago. I went to college very, very greener than anybody on earth. So heaven forbid if I did that to my own child. So it's better, but we have a long way to go.
I do have one other comment I want to mention. I'm so grateful to everyone that's making comments. If you continue making comments, I'll continue to bring them in. If you have questions, please ask. But there's a question or a comment here from G who says she relates. I grew up homophobic and later realized I was actually gay. It took years for me to accept myself. You both are doing great work. Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you so much for saying that. Was
Thank
from
you,
Jean.
Yeah, G.
Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to touch lightly on the mental health issue.
Please.
Being from Haitian descent, we treated our mentally ill extremely poorly, just like, to the extreme of ravage dogs. You'll see people out walking, you have no idea what caused them to snap, what this all derived from. I'm also from a family that was very colorful, and people laugh and say that family is crazy. They're all crazy, but they all suffer from bipolar disease, where they have, manic and very depressed states. And when you have a woman married, you've had children, your hormones are changing, there are tons of reasons that people can have mental illness. It's the word that gives us problems, just like saying AIDS. You're like, mental illness, crazy. But
Taboo, don't
depression
talk about it.
is an illness. And many people suffer from severe depression and just find a way to get through because they're not what they consider to be depressed. So definitely, in the Caribbean, I know it's an issue. You asked about how or maybe how can we start again if more people who are professionals go into that area so that they truly understand how we treat each other. Perhaps we can have better prepared, education-wise with our students, our families, to see marriages break up because a woman is now in her 40s and things are just different. She knows what she's screaming inside for, whatever it is, but she can't vocalize it because no one wants to hear. So there has to be people who are willing to listen. And we have to create those environments for ourselves through having more professionals, PhDs, psychiatrists, psychologists, people within our communities. Sometimes you'll find, and again, I'm not offending anyone, but you'll find people who are extremely educated in an area and decide to take that outside for purposes of money. But the problems are still here. So we need to be able to envelope ourselves within our communities to grow in terms of how we see things and understand that things are not the same way they were 30, 40 years ago. And to grow and to change and to be better, we have to accept that something needs to change, something.
There's a special one right now. It's called Sex and Love on CNN.
I've seen that.
And it's amazing. And as many of us as Americans watch it, we're so shocked that so many other cultures are inhibited. However, remember, even though we call it a melting pot, I don't know if really we're a melting pot, more like a salad bowl, because I don't see myself melting into anybody. Heaven forbid if somebody was trying to melt me into them. But that is amongst us. So it's not just over there. Over there now, as we become more global, is right here. It's our next door neighbor. So we have to realize that all of us together as we're living, no matter what I think must be, and I discuss in my own home, that is not necessarily prevalent with my aunt and uncles, but also my next door neighbor and the children that my children go to school with. So I think some of it is us opening our arms up and allowing people to learn, and sometimes it's subliminal, because just being around each other, we're going to learn from each other. And how you treat other people, the children are watching. If because bullying really does not start, one of you said it, bullying does not start with the children and the name calling and all that. Where do they get that from? They get that from the parents and those adults and the teenagers and all the obscenities and all of that. And so we are not teaching our children by just how we verbalize the body language and what we do and say all the time. They're watching us. So that bullying and treating you different because you're bipolar or because you're gay or because you dress differently or because you're dark. versus light.
That
All
was a
of those
thing.
things.
I'm
Oh,
sure you
definitely.
all went
You all
through.
grew
David
up.
doesn't.
Oh,
David
you
doesn't.
don't
He
understand.
didn't know
No,
these
no.
issues.
Yeah.
But yeah.
You know,
I'm not so
All
dark
of that.
anymore.
You know, it recently occurred to me, you know, and I'm in my 40s, I'm 42 to be exact, and all of a sudden
Dear
I'm having
child.
this awakening that the way that we saw people who were fair-skinned or mixed or what, that they experienced something as well, how they would be stared at if they came in our community. We'd just look at them as if they walked on water, or we despised them immediately
Right.
because of whatever but recently,
Can I cry now?
We go through vacuums because Morris
go through that,
Chutnut,
but-
Morris Chutnut became very, very popular. So for a while, the pendulum swung the other way, and so real dark was in, and then it kind of goes, but it always kind of
But
floats
only
back.
for some.
yes,
Yes.
yes.
But because I know
Only for
time is
some.
against us, there are two things I want to ask. One of each of you, and I really want to get answers before we wrap up.
Right.
If you have questions, please, just like I'm asking mine, ask yours. I will read
And
them.
remember to share and like.
Share and like.
share
Thank
and
you.
like.
Share the feed so everyone else can join in. I'm going to start with you, Shirley. So, HIV. I'm hearing this stat from Khalib in your discussion, and I'm like, new cases of HIV. I genuinely get scared by that because I didn't even remember that HIV was still even relevant, because I know that if I'm going to have sex with someone, I'm going to do a thorough check on what I'm putting myself through. And I just assumed that everyone else was doing this. Because
That's
again,
unusual.
I'm doing it for me.
How do you
Right.
do a thorough check, David?
Oh,
I'm sorry, I don't want to know.
No,
I don't want to.
You said-
Sorry.
You said we
I'm
don't
sorry.
I'm definitely doing a thorough check.
Yeah.
But so how is it? Tell me, how is it that we have this space of a lot of new cases, and that, you know, this county or that county can be ranked so high? What is? I know that part of it you said is religion. Let's move away from that. Like, what is the overall? Where is the education deficit for people to know that this is still an epidemic?
All right, and then I
and
have a question
HIV?
after this.
Sure.
But think about it. Think about lifestyle changes, or the type, as she said, the salad bowl here in the community. You have people coming from all over. You have people with different upbringings, other people who are not even educated on protection when having sex. A very, very high homosexual community. And say it as it may, men having sex with men are the top of the line in terms of people becoming infected. So whether it's about casualty, women, we tend, oh, he's not going to respect us, so we'll hold off. But men in general are very comfortable and will sleep with one another. Now, in terms of condom use, it's not just for single people. If you're not having conversations, you have a spouse. I've never used a condom with my own spouse, but there has to be a comfort there where it's like, look, you see this? I'm not sick. I don't have anything. And anything I catch, I know where to find out. It's okay to speak to your spouse that way, because there is something to be frightened for. The idea of PrEP medications that can prevent HIV conception during that time, what you don't hear is that it doesn't protect from some other things. So the fact that you'll have Hep C, anything else that you don't want to catch, you need to realize there's a way to protect yourself. So yes, more education about condoms, more conversation with the people that we're sleeping with. I mean, it's okay if you know that you're not that type of person that can commit. It's okay. Monogamy is not easy. It's not.
Why
We
not?
care-
And it's
Oh,
not for
really?
everybody,
It
but
is
you do
not
need
for
to be
everybody.
frank about who you are.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
The idea is, oh my God, they're going to call
And
me
do some
a
checking. I
tramp.
like
They're going
that.
to say
Some
this, they're
checking.
going to say
Yeah,
that.
you do ask for papers.
Yeah, you can.
I
But-
guess.
and why
I-
is monogamy not easy? Like,
Oh,
let's be
you know
real.
what?
Let's have that
Okay, let's have
conversation.
that
Why is
conversation.
it not easy?
In
Let's
Jamaica,
say-
we say puss and dog. No, it's not the same look kind of thing, but everybody's not the same. Like,
No, not
who you are
everyone.
is not who everybody
know.
is.
Okay,
so
all right.
That's the
Let's
bottom
Fair
line.
enough.
Let's say you do
That's
have
the
some
bottom.
extremely conservative people. You have people who are very fluid with their sexual, encounters. There are women who feel comfortable having sex with women, but do not consider themselves gay, and the other way around. So imagine you're married, but your husband is very comfortable to be at a party and just jump on to the next person. It happens. The problem is that we're like, oh, those people. It happens, and if it's happening,
It's not
let's
those
be
people.
comfortable with how do we protect ourselves. We can do
Alright.
whatever it is
We
with our
have
own
loads
bodies.
more comments. You had a question before I do my
have,
redirect. Priscilla, I don't know if
Yeah.
you want to get any of these.
Are there any burning questions?
There's not questions, lots of comments.
Anything burning that Okay, so before you do that, because you're still
Yeah.
looking, you started off at the beginning talking about empowerment of women, and if it's a children problem, it's a woman problem. Part of your work is with empowering women, helping women to take care of themselves, etc. Talk about that for a minute, and then we're going to actually talk about the event that you have coming up as well.
It is interesting because, and I know you're going to get to that, but one of the things that I have learned because of who I am, and I'm still discovering things about me, is that you cannot lose weight in general if you're overstressed. And I'll say that. And how does that tie into anything? It's a health concern. And many of us are trying to do way too much. We're stressing ourselves out. We have a problem with obesity in this country. And I don't have a problem saying I know I'm overweight. But the problem is we have too many women that are the super women. It's not just about all of us are busy, because people, they'll just fluff it off and say, but we're all busy. No. I'm talking about that extreme person that's trying to be perfect and do too much, and the one that's working in the community and doing home and going to school and on. That is a crisis in itself. And that's what has led me
I'm
now.
sorry. We're
to
some
be-
workaholics
I know,
over here.
yes,
So
yes.
that's why we look at
You're
it's
always-
Well,
like,
I'm going to tell you, I don't feel sorry for you. I don't feel sorry for you. Because typically, the woman will, and then she'll still go home to 2 or 3 other kinds of jobs. Typically, you may be an exception because you're
I
wonderful.
might actually be.
But
Yes.
the problem with that is we are stressing ourselves, and people don't realize education again. I'm going to grab her up. Education again. We don't realize how stress harms you and could do all kinds of things in your body. And that superwoman syndrome.
Cocktails, fabulous people. The all-inclusive 2018 Taste the Islands Experience. June 2nd from 4 to 10 p.m. on the breathtaking tropical grounds of the Fort Lauderdale Historical Society. Indulge in gourmet island cuisine, premium cocktails and spirits, cooking and mixology demos with celebrity chefs, live DJs, and more. Visit TTIExperience.com. That's TTIExperience.com. Powered by Island Syndicate and Sunny.org.
In a magical time, in a mystical place, he and she cross paths.
A Brides Expo, a destination wedding and honeymoon expo. Coming to Fort Lauderdale, Sunday, June 24th, 12 p.m. to 5 p.m. at the Bonadventure Resort and Spa West End. If you are planning a honeymoon, destination wedding, or romantic vacation, this show is a must. Over 30 exhibitors, live entertainment, destination wedding, fashion shows, door prizes, and much more. Admission free for all couples who are planning a destination wedding or honeymoon. Register at www.abridesexpo.com. Call 786-505-8141 or 954-740-8689. Don't miss being part of this exciting show.
He is earth, she is fire, she is belief.